XYZ monsters have been a staple in almost every deck since they first came out. Though many of them were meta-defining, there were also a ton of really bad ones. And in this list, we'll be going over some of the worst XYZ monsters to be printed in Yu-Gi-Oh! Starting us off at number 10, we have number 44, Sky Pegasus. This is a light beast rank 4 monster with 1800 attack, which takes any 2 level 4 monsters to be made. Its effect is to, once per turn, detach material to target and pop one of your opponent's face-up monsters. But they can pay 1000 life points to negate the effect. Now, while targeting removal is pretty decent, Sky Pegasus just does it in the absolute worst way possible. The way this effect works, letting your opponent choose between losing life points or their monster, it's never going to go the way you want it to. Most of the time, this card will simply read, make your opponent lose 1000 life points, as such a low amount of life is never really worth losing the loss on board presence, unless you're trying to pop something completely inconsequential. But while being able to detach 1 to deal 1/8 of an opponent's starting life point is more than other rank 4 options can offer, it's never going to be a consistent option for that either. This is not only because it needs your opponent to have a monster in the field in the first place, but also because if the loss in life would ever matter somehow, they can just choose to not take it. Cards like this, which let your opponent choose the effect, will always just apply their worst effect at all times. And your only shot at getting any use out of Sky Pegasus is just to be up against a new player who really overestimates the importance of life points. It doesn't help that this card came out right in the middle of the XYZ era either, with tons of better competing options for easy removal in rank 4, such as Diamond Direwolf being available way before Sky Pegasus came out. Overall, this card's most redeeming qualities end up being how easy it is to bring out and utilize its effect. And while that isn't saying much, it's worth the 10th spot on this list at the very least. And at number 9, we have Aegaion the Sea Castrum. This rank 8 water machine monster takes 2 level 8s and has 2 quick effect speed abilities. First, it can banish a random monster from your opponent's extra deck, and then its attack becomes equal to the banished monsters. Then, it can detach material to target one of your opponent's banished fusion, synchro, or XYZ monsters and return to the extra deck to then destroy a monster your opponent controls of the same card type. Aegaion kind of has the makings of a decent card, but it manages to fall short of being playable with both of its effects. Being able to mess with your opponent's extra deck has been a pretty devastating effect throughout the years, which propped up cards like Lithosagem before, and we even see in the current meta with number 89, Diabolus the Mind Hacker, forcing people to run 2 obs of their most important extra deck options. However, Aegaion can't really have this kind of impact ever, as it picks off a random monster, making it so that your chance of hitting something good can be as low as 1 in 15. Its second effect is a quick effect destruction, non-targeting one at that, but a lot has to go into it for it to go through. As soon as you equip something to Aegaion, your opponent can see what kind of monster got equipped to it, so they can just choose not to play into it. As if that wasn't enough, since the card was made before links became a thing, Sea Castrum cannot actually pop them even if it equips one. While this could be removal, it was most often just a way to randomly hold monsters off your opponent's extra deck hostage. And while this is decent, even back then you had much better payoffs for your couple of level 8s onto field, such as Divine Dragon Knight Felgrand for a negate, or Heractic Sun Dragon for removal. Aegaion the Sea Castrum could potentially rip your opponent's main combo enable on your turn, and then pop their extenders on theirs, but most likely it's just going to be a 3000 defense body on the field. And at number 8, we have Musical Sumo Dice Games. This is a generic rank 6 monster that has the effect to roll 6-sided die during the start of your opponent's battle phase. And then this card moves main monster zones equal to that die's result, clockwise. If it lands on a zone with a monster already on it, that monster gets attached to this card as a material. If this effect causes that monster's material to become more than 6, you win the duel. Musical Sumo Dice Games is probably the weirdest alternative win condition to ever be put into the game. Basically, you're supposed to be moving this card between your board and your opponent's, with each of you triggering the card and hopefully using it every battle phase until eventually someone will get 7 materials under it. In practice, it's absolutely impossible to pull off this win con by usual means, as not only is the duel probably going to be over before this even gets its 3rd material, it also requires your opponent to willingly play into it, and never remove this protectionless XYZ or even link it off if it ever reaches their board. Musical Sumo Dice isn't the first card to allow you to win the duel off of some extremely specific conditions, but it's one of the hardest to set up. If you ever want to use this card to actually win, you're going to need to stuff it full of materials without using its own effect somehow, which will probably need you to jump through hoops using rank up spells and then giving your opponent a monster for your opponent to have, and then force them to enter the battle phase, and if this wasn't hard enough, you're also going to need to roll the die right too. All of this just cements the card's role as nothing more than some of the most unpractical to use pack filler to have come out in previous years. And at number 7, we have number 58, Burner Visor. This is another rank 4 with generic materials with an effect that lets you once per turn either equip it to one of your XYZ monsters or unequip it and then special summon an attack position. While it's an equip, it allows the monster to attack directly, and if it inflicts battle damage, you can discard 1 card to inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Burner Visor comes off as Konami's way of bringing Armory Arm to the XYZ era. But while that Synchro 4 did have a place in the metagame, this card floundered completely. It needs to equip itself to an XYZ monster, and while this might not sound like an issue in decks that focus on spamming rank 4s, it makes this card much harder to use than it has any right to. You're going to have to commit at least 4 monsters to get both Burner Visor and another XYZ to get its main effect off. And then, all you get out of it is being able to attack directly. Sure, this could potentially give you a lethal shot with a high attack monster, but there's no way Burner Visor's role couldn't be filled out much better with the other plethora of rank 4s available. You had number 101 to remove whatever threat your opponent could be blocking you with, Dark Rebellion to do a ton of damage, and nowadays we even have a rank 4 that straight up hits for 10,000 damage. With Burner Visor, you're also opening yourself to get blown out much harder by any piece of removal, since it doesn't protect the equipped monster in any way, shape, or form, which makes it very easy for your opponent to get a 1 for 4 out of your play. Even in the case where everything goes right, all you get out of it is the opportunity to -1 yourself for a measly 500 burn, which has got to be one of the worst effects to require a discard out there. And at number 6, we have CXyz Mechquipped Djinn Angeneral, a rank 4 Dark Fairy with 2600 attack that takes 3 level 4s to be made. When it's XYZ summoned, you can change 1 defense position monster to attack position. If it has Mechquipped Engineer as an XYZ material, it can detach material after inflicting battle damage to deal an extra 1000 damage to your opponent. Djinn Angeneral is the rank up version of Engineer, a pretty decent card which actually saw a ton of meta play back in the day. However, the way this card works, it may as well be a ranked up version of the first card on this list. For 3 level 4 bodies, all it gives you is a rank 4 with slightly above average stats and a one-time use position change effect, and a pretty limited one at that too. This is asking for 1 more body than Photon Papillorative needs and gives you a worse version of its effects. To get the full potential out of this card, you need to have Mechquipped Engineer as a material attached to it, which implies some kind of extra setup through rank up magic spells after having summoned Engineer, and then your reward for getting all this off is just 1000 burn damage during the battle phase. Many XYZ monsters received ranked up forms back then, and though they were rarely, if ever, practical to play, they were at the least better than their base forms. This is absolutely not the case for Angeneral, as its supposedly weaker counterpart has a pretty strong protection effect which was often used to protect boss monsters for a turn. The few times people tried to rank up Engineer, it was with Astral Force to go into Tyrus, Keeper of Genesis, an indestructible beater with removal, which is what Angeneral needed to be to see play. And at number 5, we have number 31, Embodiment of Punishment. This is a rank 1 Dark Fiend XYZ which takes any 2 level 1s to be made. It can, as a quick effect, detach material from itself to change all of your opponent's monsters to face-up attack position, and force all of them to attack this turn if they're able. If you also control number 13 Embodiment of Crime, this card also becomes indestructible by battle or card effects while it has XYZ materials, and your opponent takes any battle damage you would have taken when it gets attacked. Embodiment of Crime and Embodiment of Sin are pretty much the same card. It might as well occupy the same spot on this list. If you make just one of them, it essentially does nothing, as you probably don't need to activate anything to make your opponent hit over these small 500 attack and defense rank 1s. However, the real threat is supposed to come if you've managed to summon both of them at the same time, as then they will be indestructible by battle and make your opponent take battle damage when they attack into them. Even if it might sound decent in theory, there's a reason why this kind of effect has never been part of any competent strategy out there, as it doesn't really work in a real game. The opponent can see you have made these 2 cards, they know what their effects do, and this means they have no reason to build up their board and try to go into the battle phase to get rid of him. There's a ton of easily accessible removal available in the extra deck which lets any deck deal with them. Even in the best case scenario in which somehow your opponent has monsters with high enough attacks which can deal a whole bunch of damage to them but crash into the embodiments and yet have no way to remove them, they can just choose to not conduct their battle phase. The 4 level 1 bodies required to set these 2 up is bad enough, but the conditions you need to make your opponent actually lose to these things are so specific, you'd be better off using these bodies for anything else. And at number 4, we have Infernal Flame Vixen. This rank 4 with 2200 attack takes 2 Pyro-type level 4s as materials. It can, once per turn, detach material to gain 500 attack until your opponent's end phase. When this card has 2500 more attack is destroyed, you can target 3 monsters in any graveyard and banish them. Flame Vixen might just be the hardest rank 4 to bring out in the game. Though there are XYZ that ask for 3 or more materials, or specifically typed ones, these are all much easier to bring out than 2 level 4 Pyro monsters. Pyro is already a quite uncommon type, with very few decks ever making use of it throughout the history of the game, to the point where it's a joke within the community about how people are waiting for support since several years ago. Out of the few playable ones, there's only ever really been a couple of playable level 4s, but even the deck that maxed out on both of those never played this card. For all your effort, all you got is a 2200 beater that can become 2700 until the end of the turn, which is still worse than the generic options when it comes to beating over stuff. It does have a graveyard disruption effect, but not only does it need to have used its effect to trigger it, it also needs to be destroyed by battle, which means your opponent is either willingly playing into it because the banishes don't matter, or you're having to crash this monster to get that out. All of this when the rank 4 pool already has Rasputin Berserk, which can banish a couple of cards from your opponent's graveyard by detaching materials, and then boost another XYZ monster you control once it runs out of materials. Even if it had an actual good effect, Infernal Flame Vixen likely wouldn't see play due to its specific materials. But as it is now, it only serves to show how weak the generic pyro support we have right now is. And at number 3, we have number 87, Queen of the Night. This is a rank 8 water plant monster with 3800 attack and 2000 defense, which has the ability to trigger one of these 3 effects by detaching a material during either player's turn. First, it can target a set back row your opponent controls and prevent it from being activated while this card is face up on the field. Next, it can target a plant monster in the field and change it to face down defense position. Lastly, it can target face up monsters in the field and permanently boost its attack by 300 points. For how many effects Queen of the Night has, it's actually impressive how mediocre all of them are. It's pretty unique to be able to boost a monster's attack permanently, but when the boost is as low as 300, it's probably not going to help you beat over anything. A quick effect Book of Moon would usually be quite powerful, but since it's limited to only plant monsters, it won't be any useful as disruption against most decks. Its most useful effect is the one that locks down a back row, which can be used to force your opponent's powerful traps, but it's still one of the weakest forms of back row hate available. Even if you do manage to lock out a couple of traps versus a trap deck, this effect goes away once the card leaves the field, making it strictly inferior to any other rank 4 which actually packs removal instead. Queen of the Night most likely still wouldn't see any play if it required 2 level 8s, but needing 3 of them makes it so not even dedicated rank 8 strategies will consider it. The only monster of the same rank with similar requirements to see play was Coach King Giant Trainer, and that card gave you 3 draws with its effect, while none of Queen's effects give you as much as a +1. And at number 2, we have number 7 Lucky Straight. This is a rank 7 light fairy taking 3 level 7 monsters. You can detach an XYZ material from this card to roll a 6-sided die twice, and then this card's attack becomes the larger number rolled times 700 until the end of your opponent's turn. Then, if the total roll of the 2 dice was 7, you can either send all of the cards of the field to the graveyard, special summon a monster from your hand or either graveyard, or draw 3 cards and then discard 2. Lucky Straight has the potential to give you the choice between 3 incredibly powerful effects, but it might as well just be the worst thing you could ever spend 3 level 7s on. This card's gamble is actually a bit better than it looks, since even though the chances of getting 7 out of 2 rolls is only 1 in 6, its effect is not once per turn, which means you actually have 3 chances to pull it off immediately as soon as you bring it out. That brings the odds of a favorable outcome to around 50%, and if you're really lucky, you might even get to proc its effect twice. With that said, if this was good enough to make the card playable, we would have also had Cup of Ace as a staple in every deck. The point is, the gamble effect doesn't really have a place in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, as if you want to actually win, you need to be as consistent as possible, and you certainly don't want a monster that takes investment as big as Lucky Straight to fizzle and do nothing. Considering that for the same materials you can also bring out Kashtira Riseheart, who has a 100% chance to be a Macrocosmos with a quick effect banish face down for the same 3 level 7 monsters. Even if the rank 7 pool might not be that big, this is still the worst possible thing you could do with your level 7 monsters. Which makes it even funnier that this card actually saw competitive play in the Dragon Ruler era, simply because you can get it to a high attack point values to beat over hard out boss monsters like an untargetable Obelisk the Tormentor in the Dragon Rule Mirror match, not even relying on the chance to get its extra effects off at all, just trying to roll a 6 at least once. And finally, at number 1, we have number 88 Gimmick Puppet of Leo. This is a Dark Machine rank 8 with 3200 attack, which requires 3 level 8s. Once per turn, if you have no cards in your spell and trap card zone, you can detach material from itself to gain a Destiny counter, but you cannot go into the battle phase this turn, the effect is activated. If 3 Destiny counters are on this card, you win the duel. There are many bad win conditions in the game, so many that we even have one of them in our previous slot on our list, but Gimmick Puppet of Leo might just be the worst of them all. The incredibly gimmicky ones at least usually have some incredibly highly specific combo to activate them in a single turn, while the slower ones can at least rely on a floodgate to slow the game down enough for them to win in the long run. This card just packs the worst aspects of both, in that it also requires some setup in the 3 level 8 bodies to even get it out, which is not that easy outside of dedicated combo strategies. After that, you're going to need to protect Gimmick Puppet of Leo for 3 whole turns, a monster with no inherent protection, that needs you to have no back row and so no floodgates, and locks you out of the battle phase. There are a million outs to this card, as it gets hits with every removal and it will just lose all of its counters if it's negated or flip face down, erasing all your progress towards a win condition. If you can stop your opponent from playing the game entirely and building up field presence for 3 whole turns, you probably could have won the game by just attacking with Gimmick Puppet Leo thrice anyways. The only slightly redeeming quality of this card is that it's used as a rank up stepping stone for number C88, which is also a mediocre win con, though a much better one than Gimmick Puppet of Leo. The best way to use this card is to not activate its effect at all, and simply use it as a very expensive beater, making it the worst card on this list. Alright, and that's the video. If you happen to know of any other cards we might have missed, or have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.